Hello everyone, welcome to SwitchUp. In today's video, we've got a review for you of Persona 3 Reload, which is just releasing on the Nintendo Switch 2.
This version sees a number of improvements over the original game, and we'll talk about those and go over our thoughts on the gameplay and the overall experience.
But is this one definitely worth a reload, or is it more a game of Russian roulette? Well, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. Let's start with the story then, and you play the part of a student transferring to a new school. The town that you are now living in clearly has something going on. You see this right from the off, and it transpires that there's a strange time of night named the Dark Hour, which is basically an hour hidden between day and night. When this occurs, everyday citizens find themselves entombed in a coffin, and only those with particular powers can see what's going on. Ultimately, you join a team named C's, that's Specialized Extracurricular Execution Squad, who use the titular personas to clear the dungeon of Tartarus and hopefully restore the human world.
Further exposition is delivered in between the main storyline through conversations that you'll have and relationships that you'll build up with members of that C's group.
Whilst the story is interesting, it's fair to say that it does take up a huge amount of your early game experience. You need to be prepared to do a lot of listening in those early hours as the exposition is delivered in full. What makes this easier to digest is the fact that this time around the game is fully voice acted. And whilst I did wish for a bit more action earlier on, I will say that the story is engaging and is delivered well. Let's move on to gameplay then, and I will go through the basics for those of you that haven't played a Persona game before in any incarnation. And basically it's a turn-based RPG that has the dungeon searching, battling side of things, but also has quite a heavy emphasis on the social side of each day, with you being in school of course, and building relationships as Mark alluded to earlier.
As a full remake, you can expect entirely new systems. Like the social system's been reworked, it's now not only visually very different, but the way that you interact with it has changed as well.
Your days consist of going to classes within school, but you will get to the point of the day when school is over, and a little while in you unlock free time where you can use this to start building up those relationships or social links with other characters, but also your skill points, and these will aid you when it comes to the battling side that we'll go through properly in a moment. So within classes you can earn these skill points through listening to what the teacher's saying, answering questions correctly, impressing your classmates, that sort of thing. But once you get to free time, you can do things such as join extracurricular clubs, work part-time jobs within the malls. Not only does this earn you money, but it does increase your skill points in areas such as courage and charm. And you can also buy new equipment from these mall areas that will help you later in battle.
Now, having personally played Persona 5 before playing this, combat has a lot of similarities with that release. They've obviously brought it more in line with that experience, bar a couple of things that we'll mention.
So the setup for battle in this one is that you travel to an area named Tartarus. This is kind of the main hub where the shadows, as they're called, the enemies, inhabit. And you'll go there with your team from floor to floor within these procedurally generated areas, and you'll see the enemies in front of you and can initiate combat by attacking them. From here, it's a turn-based affair, and you can control each of your party members. And this is where the persona side of things comes into it. You see, you'll collect personas by way of cards that you'll gain after battles, and each persona will have a different set of abilities that you can then use within the battles themselves. You'll level up your party members as well as your personas, and once battle is finished, you can visit what's called the Velvet Room, and here you can take your personas and fuse them together, very much like the demon fusing that you would have seen in the Shin Megami Tensei series, of which Persona is, of course, a spin-off. This will allow you to strengthen your personas. You can carry over certain skills into the new demon that you fuse or create, and then you can, of course, take these into battle, provided their level is not higher than yours. If this is the case, you won't be able to control them.
When it comes to the game's difficulty, you do actually have the option to change that in the menu. So if things get a bit too challenging, you can go into the menus and alter that to your liking. I will say it's not as annoying as some of the Persona 5 fights. There were certain fights in there that were absolutely ridiculous. It feels like they've actually balanced that out a little more for this release.
We're going to move on to some of the features that have been added for this remake now. Now, I want to make it very clear that I never played the original, be it on the PS2 or the portable version that was on the PSP. And whilst I've seen some of these explicitly as I've played, some of them wouldn't have occurred to me because obviously I had no comparison to make. They include, but are not exclusive to, being able to direct your party members within battle, which apparently was in Portable but wasn't in the original. The battle system has seen some tweaks to bring it in line with Persona 5, as Mark mentioned earlier, adding in things such as the shift mechanic, for example. Those full 3D environments, again, we mentioned those earlier. This time you'll be walking around the towns as opposed to just picking places you want to go from a menu. The full voice acting we've already mentioned. There are some additional story scenes when it comes to the social links side of the game, and quality of life features such as autosave, quick travel, and instant dungeon floor selection have also been included.
There are a number of other little changes, but that's the general gist of it. Gameplay is enjoyable, and post-game you do have a new game plus as well. You're looking at a bunch of content, aren't you?
Yeah, you really are. It's just really that slow burn that might put some people off. You just have to be prepared to wait for the game to get going, but when it does, it's really a very good game. Moving on to controls, and for the most part they are absolutely fine. Menus have been streamlined and are very accessible. There is one oddity that I will mention, and that's that you can use the stick obviously to move around the areas that you visit, but when you get into a conversation with someone, if there's any sort of option to answer them, you're not allowed to use the stick here. You need to use the D-pad, which, bearing in mind that by that point you're just in default mode and have your finger hovering over the stick, it's just a strange choice to not let you use this. Gameplay, as I said, really enjoyable once you get into it. The fact that the dungeons are procedurally generated, albeit there are specific pre-designed areas that you'll visit, the floors within them will change from time to time. That and the slow start knocks a couple of points off, but it's a great game. Gameplay gets 18 out of 20. Controls, like I said, not a problem for the most part, just a couple of strange choices here and there. They also get 18 out of 20.
Visually, Persona 3 Reload looks lovely. It runs at 4K, the character models look fantastic, and it's a game with a real sense of style.
It's definitely that style that caught my attention. Whilst the graphics themselves are impressive, I loved the anime-inspired cutscenes, I must say. It is that sense of style that really won me over. It's little things like the transitions from going from the dungeon into the battle itself. You'll see a silhouetted version of your character kind of running into battle before things start. Or when you leave the Velvet Room, for example, you'll see a hallway full of doors before you finally exit and go back to where you were. Just these little touches that give the game a sense of class.
Yeah, it's not usually the case that you notice menu art, but when you go into the menus, the character's almost plunged underwater and you can see bubbles and the water rising on the outside. It looks incredible.
We mentioned earlier that the dungeon floors themselves are procedurally generated. I do think this is where the game falls down a little bit. It did affect the gameplay to a small degree, and it does the same here with the visuals, just because you'll see a lot of the same assets over again. Even if the overall aesthetic of the dungeon changes from area to area, it's just the fact that there is that repetition within exactly what you see that just brings things down a tad. There's also just too long a gap between changes within the dungeon. Each tier of the dungeon that you get to will change its aesthetic, but you'll go through a good few floors before this happens, and coupled with the procedurally generated nature of them does just make them a bit dull to traverse, which is a shame because the battle in itself is a lot of fun.
Performance-wise, we're looking at 4K. It's very crisp indeed, whether you're playing in docked or handheld. It looks fantastic. Certainly better than the Switch 1 edition of Persona 5 that we had. However, it doesn't run at 60 frames per second, which I think is a missed opportunity. But then with Glen telling me it's Unreal Engine, kind of makes sense, but still I think it should be able to achieve that.
When we look at the audio, I think this will be quite a divisive area because it very much depends on your taste in music as to whether you'll get on board with it or not. But what I did really like is the variety of the types of music that you'll encounter. It can go from J-pop to R&B to almost opera style when you visit the Velvet Room. And it's just enough here in terms of variety that you'll never get bored even if it isn't exactly to your taste. Visuals certainly do have a sense of style, although a lack of variety in terms of how the dungeons are designed, and that frame rate of 30 frames per second brings the score down a touch. They get 17 out of 20. Audio keeps that stylish note going and has a nice sense of variety to boot. It gets 18 out of 20. Persona 3 Reload costs £54.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price, you're getting approximately 60 to 100 hours of gameplay, depending on how much of a completionist you are or how difficult you find the game, of course. And interestingly, price-wise, this is in line with how much Persona 5 Royal sold for on the Switch 1.
Yep, and it is a full and complete remake of one of the fan favourites in the series, where they've clearly put a lot of time and attention into the small details, and having things like New Game Plus as well only add value to it.
Now, of course, if you have played it before elsewhere, this will come into your thinking as to whether you want to pick it up again. But if you haven't, and this is a brand new experience for you, or if you've only played it in its original format all those years ago, then there's so much content here. And as Mark said, it is a proper remake from the ground up with some additional features added in to boot.
On balance, value gets 18 out of 20.
To conclude, Persona 3 Reload, as someone that had never played the original, was a game that I was quite intrigued to give a try to. My main experience with this series, in air quotes, is with Shin Megami Tensei, and knowing that you had Persona 5 had come out by this point, on the Switch at least, obviously 3 had been out elsewhere, I was interested to see exactly how far they'd go with this remake, and I'm happy to say that they've gone the whole hog. They've done a great job of updating that original game, be it in PS2 or PSP form, and there's so much game here for you to play that if you haven't played it before elsewhere, you're going to have a great time diving in. My only real complaints is just how long it takes to get going, but persevere because it is worth it once you get past that initial period.
For some action.
Persona 3 Reload gets a SwitchUp score of 89%.
So there you have it, that's our review of Persona 3 Reload. What do you think of this one? Are you going to pick it up? Please do let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget, if you're looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, you can use our website switchup.gg to get your eShop cards. Doing so will get you 5% of your purchase price back as cashback. And there are links down there to places such as PlayAsia if you want to import any games. Thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.